You know, David Mamet is a fantastic writer. You've seen a lot of what he's written about. You've seen a lot of what he's directed. Iconic figure. At least he was in Hollywood until he revealed himself as a conservative. And David Mamet, I want to welcome you to the program. You have written, it's actually a hilarious book. And you've got story after story about these major Hollywood figures, both those behind the scenes and those we all know. It's called Everywhere and Oink Oink. And Embittered, Dyspeptic, Accurate, it's a hilarious title, Accurate Report of 40 Years in Hollywood. 40 years in Hollywood. First of all, explain to everybody what caused you to write this book.
Well, you know, everybody in Hollywood, when we get together, and the same is true in the theater, at every conversation, someone's going to say, and do you know what that son of a bitch did, right? Because we tell these incredible stories of getting, you know, I say in the Marine Corps, they say you're going to get screwed, blued, and tattooed. And in the boxing ring, they say you're going to get your head shook, your money took, and your name in the Undertaker's book. And out here they say, welcome to Hollywood. Yeah. Right? Because it's, you know, it's like, most of the people in the studios, they're either thugs or they're pimps. But there's a third category who are both thugs and pimps.
Mm-hmm. As I read this book, let me ask you a question. What is your general take of Hollywood? Good place, cesspool, all those things?
Well, Hollywood always existed to sell popcorn, right? That's what it did. It was a bunch of Jews from the old country, most of them from Russian Poland, where my people came from, and they came over here, and they were Fox was picking up bottles and returning 2-cent bottles on the Bowery, and ended up running a studio, and Louis Mayer was a glove salesman. They were all hustlers who said, wait a second, we got this new technology. We put up a bed sheet. I'm going to show you this thing that's called a motion picture. And then they got driven out of the East Coast because Edison held the patents. So they wanted to go the other side of the country where they weren't going to have to fight Edison. They discovered that the sun was shining 380 days a year, so it became Hollywood. It became so successful that it started spawning an infrastructure, no different, Mark, with this in the federal government, right? That the country's become so successful that inevitably it's going to spawn an infrastructure which drags the thing down. So that's what happened in Hollywood, as it happens in any organism. But the other side is you got the people out there in the offices, you know, making idiot decisions based on what some idiot audience guy told them the audience wants. And then you got the people at the bottom, the artists and the craftspeople who say, geez, I really want to make a movie. And the two, you know, oil and vinegar only mixing a salad. And I was in the good side of Hollywood for 40 years, you know, making movies and having the time of my life and hanging out on the set, just having a ball. And I had very little to do with the people in the studios because the studios said, yeah, we'd like some independent films. You guys, can you make an independent film for $2, $3, $4 million? We won't pay you any salary now, but we'll pay you no salary later. And we said, yeah, sure. So for the fun of it, then the studios got into it. The independents drove out. And then streaming came in when they didn't have to appeal to an actual audience sitting in a movie theater. So every art form dies, everything dies, right? Anything that's organic lives and dies. But I was very, very fortunate in coming into it when the very, very end of the studio system was there. I knew a lot of guys who were actually even in silence, and I made a bunch of movies and wrote out a string that anybody would be grateful for, and I certainly am. And here I am now.
The golden age of Hollywood is past, isn't it? It's totally different today. Is that right?
Sure. Yeah. I say it's like the golden age of Nantucket, right? Nantucket was a whaling town, thriving whaling town. Well, then they stopped whaling out of sailing ships, and they stopped whaling out of the United States. Nantucket became a place for middle-class professionals, doctors and lawyers and school teachers, blah, blah, blah. Then the rich people discovered it, and they said, get lost. All the real estate went up, and so success led to the demise of Nantucket as anything other than a destination. But however good a whaler you are, you can't go back to Nantucket and say, guys, give me another break.
David Mamet is one of the great playwrights, more than that, great Hollywood writers, really, of all times. I can go down the list of plays and other things he's written, but we'd be here all night going through it. But I mean, really iconic figure. Today, in my view, as he has been in the past, he has spent decades in Hollywood. And he writes this fantastic book, as only he can, Everywhere in Oink Oink. And Embittered, I mean, it's a hilarious title. Dyspeptic, an accurate report of 40 years in Hollywood. Let me ask you this. The Frank Sinatra story. It's a very short chapter, but what is the Frank Sinatra story? Share that with the public here.
Are you talking about the Don Rickles story?
Yeah, exactly, without the F word.
Frank Sinatra? Okay.
Yeah.
Well, of course, sure. So I knew Don Rickles, and this is a very famous story in Hollywood. And I asked him when I first met, I said, Don, is this story true? He says, like my hand to God. So the thing about stories in Hollywood is they're hysterically funny. At least they were when I was in, because it's an in-group. Hollywood's like aviation. It's like law enforcement, firefighting, the military, medicine. It's an in-group. You cannot visit. If you're in, you're in, and if you're out, you're out. And if you're in, you got your own stories that go on forever, and you love them. You love the cover. So anyway, Don Rickles is a starting out comic, and he's playing the lounge in Las Vegas. The lounge is what you go through. It's the small bar room before you get into the main room. It's where you try out. So he's in the lounge, blah, blah, blah. Frank Sinatra comes through. Frank's not the biggest star in the world, most powerful guy in the United States. And Don says, Mr. Sinatra, excuse me, I don't mean, I'm not going to ask you to see my act. No, I'm doing the actor. Just one thing, it's my wife's birthday. And if on the way out, you just stopped, you didn't have to stop, just as you walked by our table, said, hey, Don, good to see you, how are you? It would make her birthday. Okay, so blah, blah, blah. Don's sitting at the table after his act with his wife. Frank comes by with his entourage. He says, hey, Don, how are you? Rickles says, F you, Frank. So Sinatra, who is incredibly hip, right, and dissolves in laughter, and Don Rickles' story is made because he's the court jester. So we've always had court jesters in our time. People said that in the ancient days, the job of the court jester was to sit behind the ruler and say, you are just a man, you are just a man. Remember, you were just a man. Anybody could do that job. So the guy who's the great court jester was the guy who made the guy think, and he made him laugh. So instead of saying you were just a man, he said, three of your concubines say you're a rotten lay, right? Or if you screw this up like you screwed up Sicily, you deserve to get crucified. So that's always been the position of the court jester, who was what Don Rickles is, and to a certain extent, really what I am. The position as the court jester is tell the truth in such a way that's surprising, funny, inevitable, and a little bit over the line, because or else who cares?
How well did you know Sinatra? Did you know him well?
I didn't know, but I knew his daughter, Tina, and she said something to me at dinner. I think I put it in the book. She said, you remind me of my dad. And I thought, yeah, she says that to everybody, ha. But, I asked the person she was with at the time, and they said, no. But Sinatra was fascinating because he was Frank Sinatra, the greatest singer of all time. But he was a spectacular actor. If someone said you could work with any actor in history, I think Frank Sinatra would be number one.
And he was a good dancer, too. He could pretty much do it all. And it turns out, we now know, he was a pretty good artist.
I don't know about
artwork
that, but
he
was a great silent supporter of the state of Israel. Never told nobody, but that's what he did. God bless him.
Well, while I have you on that subject, what do you make of the media in America and this element within the Democrat Party and in this administration, which turns Israel into the oppressor and the terrorists into the victims? What do you make of that?
Well, it says in the Torah, it says in the Bible, Amalek is with you in every generation. Amalek's the spirit of evil. So in the actual Old Testament, it says in every generation, people are going to rise up and try to kill the Jews. So the terrible thing, and I was talking to a guy who's an IDF combat veteran. He was there on the day after, and he saw what happened in Gaza. And he said, as horrible as that was, the reaction of the world was worse. So you want to know what I make of it? You got a minute?
Sure.
Hello? Okay.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
people say to me, geez, well, yeah, geez, what is it? What is it about the Jews? What is it about the Jews are doing? The Jews aren't doing anything. The Jews are the battered wife of Western civilization. In the days when women had no power and they couldn't vote, and they were at least in England, they were the possessions of their husband. If the husband comes home and he says, "How are you?" and he doesn't like the look on her face, he whacks the stuffing out of her. And if he gets drunk and he doesn't like the look on her face, he whacks the stuffing out of her because she's powerless and she's there. But the problem is not the wife. The problem is the guy's lack of control and a difficult life. So the Jews have always been the battered wife of Western civilization. We didn't have a home. We had no place to go to. We had no one to refer to and say, please, please help us. We tried to help out and do our best and be part of society. And if the husband was having a bad day or civilization fell apart, as it did, 1930s Germany, or as it's doing today, you turn to the battered wife. The problem for the world now is that Israel is no longer the battered wife. So everyone says, well, wait a second. What about that wonderful thing we used to do where every time I come home, I get drunk, I knock the blah out of you? And Israel says, yeah, not anymore. So the Democratic Party, which has always been the party of slavery and the party of racism, and it's always been the party, curiously, of anti-Semitism. You can't find a bigger anti-Semite than Franklin Delano Roosevelt. How many people died because he wouldn't let him into this country, or because he wouldn't interdict the train lines to Auschwitz? But the Jews came over like my grandparents and probably like yours, and they said, wait a second, a minimum wage, this, that, welfare jobs for everybody, civilian conservation corps. I'll vote for that, but we're still voting for Franklin Roosevelt 70 years later, and the Democratic Party has gone in the tank for these swine who call themselves the Squad, and they say, yes, anything for you guys, please, please, please. Please let me appease Iran. Well, under Trump, people said, Trump was bringing peace to the Middle East. I said, that's not true. He brought peace to the Middle East, right? So now we're in so now we're back with the Obama-Biden people, and they say, no, do not forget, Israel was the battered wife because they're Jews. And so Israel says, no, I don't think so, but the Democrats tie their hands. So I'm not going to say this on national radio, but if I did, I would say that any Jew who votes for the Democrats is out of his mind.
I agree with that 100%, by the way. This is a fantastic book by a fantastic guy, David Mamet. It's Everywhere and Oink Oink. And I think you're going to really enjoy this book, particularly during the holiday season. You should acquire it for yourself, for family members or friends. And it is something that's lasting. And it is funny. These stories you tell, some of them are very strange, but it is funny. And you go up and down the chain. And how long did it take you to write this? And you also have artwork in here, comics or drawings in here.
So I was talking to my wife one day bitching about Hollywood. I said, somebody should write a book called Everywhere in Oink Oink, 40 Years in Hollywood. She said, you write it. I said, no, it's a stupid title, blah, blah, blah. She said, no, you write it, for God's sake. So I just started telling these stories. And a lot of them are salacious because that's what Hollywood, life in Hollywood was like. It was work hard, play hard, right? And it sure as hell was. And I hope most of them are funny because those are the stories we remember. They're funny and they're odd, and I'm so thankful that I was there for it.
And we are too, because most of us aren't there. Most of us haven't been there in terms of the way you have as a career, and you shed a lot of light on this, and it really is a great book. And I want to congratulate you. You can get it on Amazon.com as I speak, any major bookstore. It is Everywhere in Oink Oink by David Mamet. Mamet, right? What am I saying? Mamet. That's the French pronunciation. No, I'm just kidding.
It's Mamet. It's like Jackie Bissett, Mamet. It's Mamet.
No, I know what it is. And you know what? It's like people call me Levin, and I don't give a damn. Whatever it is, it is. All right, brother. God bless you, and keep in touch, okay?
Thank you, Mark. Bye-bye.
All right, bye-bye. It's a fantastic book. He's got his own illustrations in there. It really, only a guy like him could write something like this. And it really is fantastic. I know you're going to love it. I really do, particularly for the holidays. And you're going to learn about a lot of famous people you know, and there's a lot of powerful people behind the scenes that you don't know. And he had to deal with a tremendous number of them. It's not a sourpuss book. Oh, woe was me. What was me? There's none of that in there. That's not the point. He is, as you can tell, very straightforward, very forthcoming, very transparent. And that's what makes the book great. And he's a great writer. Everywhere and Oink Oink, Amazon.com, and any major bookstore.